So what now? The Grizzlies are in the midst of their worst stretch of the season. Desmond Bane's struggling. Jaren Jackson Jr. isn't playing up to his potential. Tyus Jones isn't getting a lot of minutes anymore. Where do the Grizzlies go from here? Who needs to step up? And previewing this upcoming game against the Toronto Raptors later on today. Let's break all that down right here, right now, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer of the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee, breaking down everything going on with the Grizzlies, around the Grizzlies, right here on the grounds, in the locker room, in the FedEx Forum, and on the road from time to time as well. So thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you continue to make Locked On Grizzlies one of your first listens each and every day. That means you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen. Tune in to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you continue to like, comment, and subscribe as well. I've been seeing all the comments. We appreciate the ratings as well. And, we're going to give some feedback on some of those comments as well. As I said, we appreciate the feedback that you give. Anything that you suggest that we can do to make the show better, we're going to do that. So thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies as well. But let's jump right into it. Right now, I started off the show saying, what now? Where do the Grizzlies go from here? They've lost 4 out of 5 games. Some people are saying, oh, there's no reason to overreact. Some people are saying, make a move, do something. This isn't working. Well, I'm going to discuss all of that right here because I think, most people, if you've been tuned into Locked On Grizzlies, you understand that my mindset hasn't changed about this team. I still think this is a team that could represent the Western Conference potentially. I do think this is a team that could go further than last season's team did. They're capable of all those things, and they were capable of all those things before this stretch, and they're still capable of all those things. So what now? What needs to change? What needs to evolve in order to help this Grizzlies team get back to playing basketball that made them the number 1 seed just, a week and a half ago? And the first thing that I want to point out is help Ja Morant. Ja Morant needs a little more help. We kind of touched on this a little bit in yesterday's episode as well. So if you missed yesterday's episode, make sure you go check that out as well, where we talked about Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane in particular. But I'm going to take it a step further because you haven't heard it probably from this perspective yet. If you have, this is the Damichael kind of twist on it, I would say. So here's the thing. Ja Morant needs help, right? But I want to go at it from a couple different perspectives. Remember earlier this season, right? We saw Tyus Jones, Ja Morant lineups. Well, we got a little small dosage of it, recently. But in the last 3 games, we've only seen that lineup in 1 of the past 3 games. What's also happened in the past 3 games? It lines up with the return of Desmond Bane. So I want to touch specifically on Tyus Jones because what are the things, that we've been talking about with this Grizzlies team, as of late? What's been the big issues during this stretch? Well, 1, they're not shooting the 3-pointer very well. And 2, the ball has been stagnant a lot. Those are 2 areas, 2 of the main areas where Tyus Jones helps out. And I'm not saying, these are minutes that should come at the expense of Ja Morant. Because, there ain't no way. Ja Morant is the one player, offensively at least, who's kind of, brought it the past couple of games. So 3 games so far since Desmond Bane has returned. Did you know that Tyus Jones, 2 of his 3 lowest, games in minutes played so far this season have come during that stretch? He played 15 minutes and 20 seconds in a win against the Suns. That was his 3rd lowest total this season. He played 20 minutes and 10 seconds against Golden State, which was still, on the lower end of what he's been playing most of this season. And he played 12 minutes and 51 seconds against the Suns in the 17-point loss absolutely the lowest amount of minutes that he's played this season. So with all that being said, let's go back to the original, point here. Yesterday, we were talking about the shooting gap. Think about that Suns game. The Grizzlies were outshot on three-pointers 17-8. That's a 9 3-pointer difference. That's a 27-point gap. They basically gave the Suns 27 points from beyond the arc. Tyus Jones is making over 1.5 three-pointers per game this season. That's a career high for him. He's shooting 4 attempts per game at a 37.5% clip. Quite frankly, I know he's the backup to Ja, and I will say this. Now, we did see, I believe it was the game against the Suns, the most recent game against the Suns. We finally got a lineup that I've been waiting to see the Grizzlies potentially use, because I don't think, just because Desmond Bane comes back, that means, all right, Desmond Bane's back, Tyus Jones goes back to 15 minutes per game. No, you're paying Tyus Jones as the highest paid backup point guard in the NBA right now. I know some people like to say, Russell Westbrook's the highest paid backup point guard in the league now and all that, and they throw a couple other names out there. But look, here's the thing. Tyus Jones, when he got his contract, it was signed knowing that he would be a backup point guard. When Russell Westbrook signed his contract, he was one of the best point guards, a known superstar in the NBA, and it was that way for a couple other guys as well. Tyus Jones has the biggest contract in the NBA of a backup point guard, period. Now getting back to the point here. If you go back to that game, we saw Tyus Jones, Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane on the floor together. I've been clamoring for that lineup. I think that could potentially, and we don't have enough of a sample size yet, but I think potentially that could be your go-to offensive lineup where the Grizzlies are just humming offensively. Because basically you're subbing in Tyus Jones for Dillon Brooks in the backcourt. So you're going to sacrifice some defense there. But as long as you got Jaren Jackson Jr. on the back end, they had Brandon Clark also in the game as well. So 2 switchable guys, 2 guys who can move around very well on the perimeter, as well as big men that can kind of cover up some space in some of the weaknesses of, having a Ja Morant and Tyus Jones backcourt. I think that lineup kind of can fuel a lot of offense. And this is how you help Ja Morant. We saw it in pieces. I'm going to ask Taylor Jenkins, later on about, how, they can get more minutes out of this lineup, what he thought of it, but we didn't get to see it long. I think that Tyus Jones, Ja Morant backcourt pairing doesn't have to completely go away. You simply slide Desmond Bane over to the 3 spot, and, you're basically saying, hey, we think Tyus Jones playing alongside Ja Morant and Desmond Bane gives us more offense than Ziaire Williams, John Conchar, or Dillon Brooks playing alongside, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. And I think, that's a fair case to make. I think most of us can agree that that is the case. You're going to lose some defensively there. But simply put, the Grizzlies need more shooting on the floor right now. And Desmond Bane is the best three-point shooter on this team. Dillon Brooks makes over 2 3-pointers a game at a 34.5% clip. Ja Morant makes 1.8 three-pointers per game at a 33% clip. Jaren Jackson Jr. is making 1.5 a game at about 34.5%, 34.7% to be exact. With Tyus Jones, you get 1.5 makes on 37.5% shooting. So basically, he's been one of your better three-point shooters. I think Santi Aldama and John Conchar are the guys who qualify outside of Desmond Bane. Santi Aldama and John Conchar are the guys who qualify as in being better three-point shooters up to this point of the season. So you want to get those guys, more minutes, the ones that are going to shoot it. We can talk about John Conchar and how much he will or won't shoot the basketball in stretches. But Tyus Jones, you got to find a bigger role. You're paying him to be the highest paid backup point guard. Him playing 12 minutes, 15 minutes, I just think those are unacceptable numbers for Tyus Jones. And another point I want to make, I won't hover on this for too long, because I think at the end of the day, a big thing that the Grizzlies need to do is they need to get more shooting on the floor. I know perimeter defense is what a lot of people, kind of hone in on when we talk about Ziaire Williams being on the floor, when we talk about Dillon Brooks being on the floor. And I completely agree. Remember, Dillon Brooks is the top on-off player on the Grizzlies right now. He has the best plus-minus, with that being said. So I think somehow, some way, it wouldn't be a bad idea to try to work Jake LaRavia or David Roddy into the rotation in some type of way. How that looks, I don't know, because the Grizzlies like to play 10 They like to play 10 players. Could we make the argument that they should play 11 guys or kind of stagger a couple guys where you play 11, but you still play them in dosages where it's a 10-man primary rotation? We can say that, but have the Grizzlies done that? No. Will the Grizzlies probably do that? Probably not. They want to stick to 10 guys, and, Taylor Jenkins is big on rhythm. He wants to find a rhythm. He wants to find pairings that work together and stick to those pairings. Jake LaRavia right now is still shooting over 37% from three-point range and one of the top shooting rookies in the NBA right now. David Roddy, before this last game against Phoenix, in his last 15 games prior to the game against Phoenix, where he came in at the end of the game, he had made three-pointers in 13 of the 15 games he's played in. So we talked about John Conchar earlier, and I talked about just, him not taking a lot of shots, him not shooting the basketball. David Roddy is going to shoot the basketball. You don't have to worry about that. And as I said, 13 games out of 15, he made a three-pointer. That's a big boost for this team right now. We're talking about how the Grizzlies, 4 consecutive games right now where they have not made 10 three-pointers. David Roddy could help that, I think, in a way. Jake LaRavia could help that. Now, I will add that David Roddy defensively has not been a positive. David Roddy has not, when you look at the eye test, when I'm watching him defend, I like the effort. I think, he is definitely putting in the effort, but if you look at the advanced numbers defensively, he's been a minus for this team so far. And Jake LaRavia, there's not a big enough sample size to this point. But, I just based off what we've seen, I don't think he's been a great defender as well. So you're probably going to lose some defense with those guys. But I think what you have on the back end, you have Jaren Jackson Jr., one of the best defenders in the game. Take advantage of that. You can take more chances on the perimeter. And at the end of the day, we're talking about how to help Ja Morant, right? That's how you help him. Ja Morant's going to get downhill. He's going to get to the rim, put more shooting around Ja Morant to maximize his potential. So we're talking about how you can help Ja Morant, and he's going to need some help in this upcoming game against the Toronto Raptors. We're going to preview that matchup coming up here in a second. But before we preview that matchup, I want to talk to you about Rocket Money. See, the thing about Rocket Money is it's also formerly known as Truebill. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spendings, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. I use Rocket Money myself, and Rocket Money has been a big help for me and, just stabilizing some things with some bills. Rocket Money helped me, delete some bills, take care of some unwanted subscriptions. And then the thing I like about it is when due dates are coming up and things like that. Some people don't like this, but I like the fact that Rocket Money will say, hey, you have this bill and this bill coming up on this date. When I'm thinking about covering the Grizzlies and when I'm, showered or filled up with work, Rocket Money takes the time to remind me of, my daily duties of paying my bills and things like that. So Rocket Money, it also helps you with your credit. So if you need some credit help, Rocket Money can also assist you with that as well. So look, it's simple. Stop throwing your money away and cancel all those unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easiest way. All you have to do is go to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA to help out. So with the Grizzlies right now, I think we know this is one of they're in the midst of probably a season worst stretch right now. But the thing is, the Toronto Raptors haven't been much better. Toronto Raptors are struggling, and they're struggling to the point where Toronto is 15-19. They're basically kind of on the edge of the play-in right now in the Eastern Conference. And it's a talented roster. So I was kind of looking at it. I was like, what's wrong with Toronto? I saw that they have a 10-7 home record, right? So immediately I'm going, that could be trouble, right? We talked about the Grizzlies, their struggles on the road this season. The Grizzlies are 6-9 on the road, and Toronto's 10-7 at home. So I'm like, that spells trouble. But then I look at it a step further, and I go look at the recent games that Toronto's played. Toronto has lost 3 consecutive games on its home floor. Basically, they were 10-4 at home, lost 3 consecutive games, albeit against some really good opponents. But this is more than a winnable game. The Grizzlies are the favorites. They should be the favorites. And this is a game they should take care of business. It's way too early in the season to use the word must-win game. It's way too early for that. But the thing is, the Grizzlies, the schedule ain't getting much easier. You got Toronto right now. Then after Toronto, there's a home back-to-back, by the way. You play the Pelicans, who, if you saw Ziaire Williams last night, 43-point game. I think he scored 13 consecutive. He looks close to unstoppable right now. That Pelicans game is going to be tough. And then on that same night, yesterday, saw the Sacramento Kings come back from 19 down against the Denver Nuggets. So you got a back-to-back against the Pelicans and the Kings coming up at home. So this schedule isn't letting up. I mean, we're into the meat of it right now. But basically, this game against the Toronto Raptors is an important one. And I think the key to success is slowing down Pascal Siakam. That's where everything starts in Toronto. If you did not know, Pascal Siakam is the reigning Eastern Conference Player of the Week, and he's been on a tear. Over 30 points in 3 of his last 4 games, and it's not just the scoring. Over 5 rebounds and over 5 assists as well in his last 4 games. And I went back, I was watching the games, watching the films, and just looking at the variety of ways they use him. You know about Pascal Siakam getting downhill, sort of like in a Giannis type of mode. They give him the ball top of the key, and he can kind of make things happen, gets downhill. He has that long frame where he's capable of scoring from different directions. But he has a nice face-up game. He has a nice turnaround shot. I think, they do a lot of those 4-5 pick and rolls, or they do the small, big pick and rolls with him where they kind of get switches onto smaller guards. And we know the Grizzlies do have their share of smaller guards. And in certain points of the game, the Grizzlies do like to switch. Those are matchups that Siakam can take advantage of. So when we're talking Siakam, the Grizzlies, I think, like they do against some of the other teams who have great, power forwards that they play in these situations, they are kind of equipped to best handle, his skill set. Primarily Jaren Jackson Jr., talk about his rim protection abilities, having Steven Adams on the back line as well. Brandon Clark coming off the bench with his mobility, his ability to stay in front of a guy like Siakam. Santi Aldama as well. He can slide his feet really well for a guy who's almost 7 feet, and he's shown the ability to block some shots as well. So the Grizzlies have, some guys that they can throw at Pascal Siakam to kind of, ruffle some things up. But he's on a tear right now. I think if you want to slow down the Raptors, think that everything starts with him. And the other thing is you got to take care of the ball against this team. Fred VanVleet is questionable for this game as well. That's another important caveat to point out here. Fred VanVleet is questionable. He is, I think, one of the more underrated point guards in the game. He's NBA champion for a reason, and he came up big for that team in the NBA Finals against the Warriors that year when they won their title. But when we talk about this defense, they get a lot of deflections. If you go back to last season, when we were talking about the Grizzlies being at the top of the league in steals and blocks, and they were right there in deflections and stuff like that. Toronto was the other team that was right in that conversation. And you look again right now, Toronto leads the NBA in steals. It's partly Nick Nurse, the head coach over there. He defensively, they really emphasize versatility. They do a lot of things over there to kind of cause havoc. And the head of the snake is Fred VanVleet. When he plays, it can be long nights defensively, but it's not just him. OG Anunoby averaging over 2 steals per game as well. Gary Trent gets you over a steal. I think a 1.5 steals per game. Siakam averages a steal. Thaddeus Young, the Memphis native, Mitchell High School's finest, gets you a steal as well. So basically, you got 5 guys over there who are getting a steal pretty much every night. And OG Anunoby is getting you, over 2 steals per night as well. So it's going to be fun. I'm pretty sure they're probably going to put OG Anunoby, he's going to guard either Ja or Dez. Fred VanVleet is probably going to get the other, of that duo. So if he plays. So this is a fun matchup. I think Toronto is much better than the record indicates. That 15-19 record is not this team. Toronto is a team, I think, still the team that made the postseason last season, that went into the postseason hot. And I think they had the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they lost to, the 76ers in that series. But Toronto is really good. 15-19 doesn't do it justice. This is a game the Grizzlies shouldn't overlook. They won't overlook, after their recent play. And like I said, it's not a must-win. We're not going to call it a must-win. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies are in a situation where they need to get some wins now. You want to take care of the games that you should win. That's the position that they're in right now. So we just mentioned previewing this game. It's a big game for the Grizzlies. I think this is a very winnable game. The Grizzlies are the favorites in this game. Now we're going to talk about the players that need to bring more to the table, and going to have a couple call to actions here as well. So you've been asking for it. They're saying, Damichael, who do you think needs to be the guys to step up? We're going to talk about that coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. Before we get there, I want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen each and every day. Make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast as well, because it's the biggest stories around the sports world, and you get it in 20 minutes or less. I mean, it doesn't take long. This is just a trip home for you from work. So it's the instant reactions, the game recaps, and Locked On takes of the day. Locked On Sports Today podcast is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. You're hanging out with some friends and you're putting back a few drinks. Just remember, if a few drinks becomes too many and the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you should think about calling for a ride. If you're saying, no, I live nearby, I can make it home, it's no big deal, I don't have to, call for a ride. No, that's not what you should do, because what are the odds you get pulled over? And even if you get pulled over, what's the worst that can happen? Guess what? Your insurance could go up. You could lose your license. You could lose your job. You could total your car. And in the worst case scenario, you could possibly harm someone. So everyone knows about the risk of driving drunks. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel under the influence. And that's why police officers are out there right now, and they're looking for impaired drivers. It's around that time of the year. It's around New Year's. So it's simple. Call to action here. If you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies on today. We're gonna knock this out, and we're gonna break this down. I think there are a couple players we can kind of point to and say, hey, these guys need to step up. I've talked about Desmond Bane already. I'm not about to talk about Desmond Bane because, quite frankly, Desmond Bane, personally, he's the least of my concerns. And I think he should be the least of your concerns as well. I mentioned, how he started the NBA season this season. Started off slow, and now he's kind of, going through one of those stretches again. He's a rhythm guy. He'll find it. Zero worries about him. Two guys I think need to step up. I'm going to start with Jaren Jackson Jr. Talked about him a little bit yesterday, but there's more to the picture here, because this Toronto Raptors game, I think, could be a revealing one in terms of some of the things that you guys have heard me say about what Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to do to improve. So yesterday I said what I've noticed about Jaren Jackson Jr. is, he's dominating those matchups against those smaller opponents, which is great, because historically we haven't seen Jaren Jackson Jr. be as aggressive and assertive, even against those smaller, opponents. Like the Suns, a couple games ago when the Suns played the smaller lineup, he had 24 points, 10 rebounds, looked dominant, throwing down dunks. We saw the first game, he played when he returned, I believe it was against the Pelicans, and he was throwing down two-handed dunks and, just looking like a force, in the paint. So with all that being said, I saw someone in the Locked On Grizzlies comment when I said he's dominating the smaller opponents, and then I pointed out that the Suns played, a bigger lineup in this most recent game, with Jock Landale joining the starting lineup, big 6'10", 6'11" guy. And then against the Warriors, with Draymond Green kind of being the primary matchup for Jaren Jackson Jr. Then I pointed out the Warriors switching Draymond Green on to Jaren Jackson Jr. in Game 6 of the playoffs last season after he had a big game in Game 5 against a smaller Warriors team. And someone in the comments said, Draymond Green, 6'6". What is this guy talking about? Draymond Green has a 7'1" wingspan, FYI. And if you don't know how much of a difference that is, Bam Adebayo, one of the best inside defenders in the NBA, who's also, 6'9", 6'10", 6'9", he has a 7'1" wingspan. So Draymond Green, yes, he may be 6'6", but he does not have the arms of a normal 6'6" person at all. He's 7'1", has a 7'1" wingspan, and that's where he contests his shot. That's why he averages a block per game over the course of his career. That's why he's one of the better defenders in the NBA, because he can get his hands on a lot of balls and things like that. So height for him, it's not a big of a factor. That's not what I'm talking about. Size is more than height. Size is wingspans. Size is leaping ability. All of that factors in to what I'm saying here. So with the Raptors, you're talking about, Pascal Siakam, 6'8", 6'9" guy as well. And Jaren Jackson Jr. has the advantage. And granted, he's going to have the overall height advantage pretty much every night. This is a 6'11" power forward we're talking about. Like, he's going to have the height advantage pretty much every night. I'm talking about the guys who have those long wingspans, who have, the ability to kind of minimize that size difference from when we're seeing small ball guys on him, like small forwards, guys who primarily have played small forward throughout their careers, or guys who play, power forward, but they've, 6'6", and they have, 6'10" wingspans or something like that. It's a difference. So with that being said, I think this game, Toronto isn't the smallest team out there. They're not overly huge as well, but this is a game where, okay, we see Jaren Jackson Jr. At the end of the day, he can't choose the nights to be great. Jaren Jackson Jr. can't choose the nights to be great. He can't just be great against the smaller opponents, or he can't just be, available against certain teams. The Grizzlies need Jaren Jackson Jr. We've seen in this stretch where I think when he came back, I mean, you could argue that stretch was probably one of the best, if not the best, of his career. Just the two-way dominance that he was showing, shooting the three-point ball really well. Tying the Grizzlies record with 8 blocks in a game. He has shown the entire skill set. But the Grizzlies need this more consistently. We talked about having that help for Ja. When Ja, he gets a lot of attention. There are going to be nights where Ja Morant is not going to be able to efficiently score you 30 points because teams are putting so much attention on him. And those games, kind of going back to the playoffs against the Minnesota Timberwolves, when they did a great job, minimizing Ja Morant's impact there. Desmond Bane stepped up and, was a big part of that series. Brandon Clark stepped up and really helped the Grizzlies win that series. Jaren Jackson Jr. should be that guy. He should be that guy. He can get to the free throw line with his size. When he puts the ball on the floor, guys are going to foul him a lot. He's big. He's 6'11", 240, 250 pounds, and he's getting downhill. Guys are going to reach because they don't want to that body to bounce off of them. They're going to reach for the ball, and he has the ability, to finish around the rim where he can use either hand. That's going to make guys reach for the wrong hand, and that's going to draw some fouls. So his skill set just caters to more dominance than we're seeing right now. And I think this is the game. This is a big game. Okay, you're playing the Raptors, not the biggest team in the world, by any means. But you know what? They're not small either. This isn't a team that Jaren Jackson Jr. is just going to line up against and just bully ball and get his normal numbers. This is a team we've seen. They have guys coming off the bench like Chris Boucher, who has a very long wingspan. Christian Coloco, has good size as well. Even Thad Young, another guy who's 6'8", 6'9", but Thad Young has nice wingspan as well. And they have some bodies. They're going to throw all those guys possibly at Jaren Jackson Jr., but we need to see what he can do against more size. We need to see what he's going to do against longer defenders who can challenge him more and won't just, be at a big disadvantage when he gets the ball inside and just goes up with his left hand or goes up with his right hand. Another guy is Ziaire Williams. Now, I mentioned, I think a couple episodes ago that I talked to Ziaire Williams in the locker room after the Warriors game. Yeah, it was after the Warriors game in San Francisco, and I'm going to be honest with you. The conversation, to me, it was very revealing. Hearing him say, hey, I'm confident as ever right now. He feels good. He feels just as confident as he did last season when he went on the hot stretch. And, he feels as confident as he did in the preseason. He feels as confident as he did in Summer League when the Grizzlies put him in pick-and-roll situations and allowed him to handle the ball. That's the Ziaire Williams that the Grizzlies need right now. We're talking about, the bench and what the bench can do. So what the Grizzlies have done right now is they're staggering their lineups. The bench never comes in and it's all 5 guys. It's never Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Ziaire Williams, Brandon Clark, and Santi Aldama. I'm not going to say never, but primarily what the Grizzlies prefer is those 5 guys usually aren't in the game at the same time. What happens is during the first timeout, Jaren Jackson Jr., what we've been seeing so far, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane usually are your first subs. In this last game, Ziaire Williams checked in and Brandon Clark checked in as well. No, Santi Aldama, I'm sorry. Ziaire Williams and Santi Aldama checked in those situations. So that puts Ziaire Williams in a lineup with Dillon Brooks, with Ja Morant, and that puts him in a lineup with Steven Adams. And all those three guys, Ja Morant, Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams, I think are guys that can help bring the best out of Ziaire Williams. In particular, when he's on the floor with Dillon Brooks, he doesn't have to guard the primary wing guy on the other end. I think that's big for Ziaire Williams as well. You know, they like to match him up against shooters, guys who are going to do a lot of running. If you have Dillon Brooks and Ziaire Williams in the game at the same time, you can kind of put Dillon Brooks on a player who most teams have these type of players. That's why, you know, we can kind of talk about it in general terms here. Most teams have a guy who's primarily on the ball and then another guy who's going to shoot, you know, off the ball. Take the Sacramento Kings, for example. If he comes in the game and they're going against Kevin Huerter and De'Aaron Fox, instead of putting them on De'Aaron Fox, you put Dillon Brooks on De'Aaron Fox, and you have Ziaire Williams chase around Kevin Huerter. I think that matchup best goes to his skill set on the defensive end. And then on the offensive end, we finally got to see it, right? We've seen a couple alley-oops lately between Ja Morant and Ziaire Williams. And I'm going to tell you something else that I've noticed. This is just kind of a sub-factor to the Ziaire Williams impact as well. The thing that Ziaire Williams does impressively is he runs the floor with the best of them. And you don't see this on TV much. You gotta be there to see this. Sometimes when Ziaire runs the floor, he takes away the best defender on the other end. So let's say you have Mikal Bridges, who I saw this in the Suns game recently. If the Grizzlies are getting back in transition and Mikal Bridges is the only defender back for the Suns, and Mikal Bridges is assigned to guard Ja Morant, if Ziaire Williams takes off down the floor and he's the only Suns player back there to defend Ziaire Williams, well, guess what Mikal Bridges has to do? He has to go pick up Ziaire Williams. Because if he doesn't pick up Ziaire Williams, it's an open dunk, it's open alley-oop, and Ja Morant's going to find him every time. So when Mikal Bridges picks up on Ziaire Williams, that causes a lesser defender to defend Ja Morant. And usually in that case, Ja Morant gets an easier scoring opportunity. He has a matchup that he likes, that he can take better advantage of. And that all comes from a guy like Ziaire Williams pushing it up the floor. So that caters better to when he's on the floor with Tyus Jones, for example, who's not going to take advantage of those mismatches as, I guess, at a higher level, you know, like a Ja Morant can. So that's why I like that pairing, you know, pairing him on the floor with Ja Morant. A lot of times we seen a lot of Ja Morant to Ziaire Williams alley-oops last season, but Ziaire Williams needs to be better. He needs to step up. I think it's coming. It's only a matter of time. I mean, he told me he feels good. And I was talking to Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones said he looks good in practice. Anything doesn't look different. So all things considered, I think he's going to turn around for him really soon as well. And the Grizzlies should. I mean, this is a big game. They need this win. You don't want to lose 5 out of 6 in the Western Conference, basically. And this is a very winnable game for the Grizzlies. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today, man. Make sure you go make the Locked On Sports Today your second listen, where Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. On the next episode, might be me and Joe Mullinax finally back together. We'll see, possibly maybe just Joe, but we're going to break down the game against the Toronto Raptors, what happened, the goods, the bad, the do's, the don'ts, all of that on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But we thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you continue to tune in, like, subscribe, comment, all of those good things. We appreciate you, and the show's only going to get better from here. We'll see where the Grizzlies go from here to get closer to turning the leaf to a new calendar year. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, and we'll see you again on tomorrow on Locked On Grizzlies.